Hi, my name is Michelle. I'm a piano teacher and I want to teach you today the easiest way to learn all of your major scales from the simplest one to the most difficult one. And so instead of doing them in any sort of chromatic order or order based on the circle of fifths or adding sharps and flats, what we're going to do is we're going to start with what is just the easiest to learn. And we're going to add one scale on top of the next. And this, I think, is a very logical order to learn your scales. This is a way you can learn scales from the very first piano lesson, or even before you begin piano lessons. This is for very, very basic beginners, for 3-year-olds, for new adult beginners. Wherever you are as a pianist, it is never too early to begin learning scales this way. And I have lessons for each one of these scales. I'm working on a whole series. So today what I'm going to do is just talk you through an overview, and just know that I'll break it down further in other videos. So please subscribe and follow my channel if you want more details about all of this information. So when I teach major scales to my students, I like to start with B major. B major has 5 sharps. It's a lot of black notes, but because of that, it keeps your hand exactly where it needs to go to teach you how to cross your thumb underneath and to have perfect technique. It gets you playing all the way up and down the piano from the very first lesson, and I think it's a lot of fun to start with B major. So, without further ado, I'm going to just tell you each of the scales. So we'll start with B major and C major hands separately, but we'll go all the way from the bottom of the piano to the top of the piano 4 or 5 octaves and get you really, really going, because that helps you get really familiar with the setup of the piano keyboard, and it allows you to understand the fingering patterns in much more detail if you go ahead and start with many octaves up and down. So after that, we transfer the skills we used for the Black Key scale B major to another place and learn C sharp major. Okay, so they're very, very similar in a lot of respects, and so it's an easy one to add to your repertoire. So then you've got B, C, and C sharp. Next, we learn F major with both hands together in parallel motion. And the reason I picked F as the next one to learn is because you have your thumbs in the same places. Right hand and left hand both have thumbs on F and C, and so that makes it feel very balanced, and it's easy to coordinate all of those thumb crossings as you go up and down the piano. Next is F sharp, which follows the same basic fingering pattern as B and C sharp, so it will feel very familiar. There's only one note that's different from the other 2 that you've already learned, so it's a really easy scale to do next. Once you've learned those 5 scales, then you're ready to start to understand a little bit more about music theory and how scales are created. We talk about half steps and whole steps, and I introduce the 5-finger scales, which are just 5 notes at a time and going through all 12 major keys. Once you get that under your belt and really like in your fingers, and you understand this half step placement, then we expand that to a full major scale, a full octave, so 8 notes of the scale, and figure out how to find all of your black notes for all of the scales, okay? Then we do the circle of fifths, and that is where you finally understand sort of the order of all these black notes, how we add on one at a time, and what logic goes behind that. Now that you have this foundation, you can play with right and left hand together. You know how the half steps and whole steps work to create a major scale, and you've gotten some fluency and speed. Then we finally get to C major, parallel motion with your hands together. And that is the default fingering for all of the scales. And once you learn this one, then you're done with the easy stuff and you're ready to move on to sort of the second level. So this corner over here, G, D, A, and E, those are all very similar scales, similar to each other. They all have F sharp in them, and then we add C sharp, and so they're all very kind of related to each other, and they all have the exact same fingering as C major in parallel motion. So once you've learned all of this, you're ready to go through all 4 of those, and they're kind of equivalent in a lot of ways. So one at a time, we learn G, D, A, and E. And that's kind of like a level 2 of scales. Level 3 is learning those last 3 flat scales. And these have fingerings that are really bizarre. They're not really difficult. They're just strange, and I have ways for you to remember and learn, so it's not too tricky. You already actually know the fingering pattern for all of these scales from F major, so it's not too complicated. You'll be okay. So the last 3 scales, A flat, E flat, and B flat, and that is the order that I think makes the most sense to learn your major scales. If you're very new, very beginner, and you want to get them all under your belt without feeling overwhelmed, I recommend doing them in this order. Now, check out all of my other lessons where I explain each of these one at a time, and I give you lessons about thumb crossing technique and how to put your hands together, and I break it down step by step. Thanks for watching, and I hope you subscribe and follow me on my channel so you can learn more about the piano.